The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked Phoenix sidewalks as 8-year-old Emma trudged home from Martin King Elementary School. Her backpack, decorated with hand-drawn butterflies and stars, bounced against her small shoulders with each step. It was Tuesday, October 15th, and like every other Tuesday, Emma walked the same route she'd memorized since kindergarten. Past the corner bodega where Mr. always waved, past the park where teenagers played basketball, and through the alley that cut her walk short by 5 minutes. But this Tuesday would be different. This Tuesday would change everything. Emma hummed quietly to herself, mentally reviewing her spelling words for tomorrow's test when she heard it, a sound so faint she almost missed it, a whimper, soft, desperate, and heartbreaking. She stopped mid-step, her worn sneakers scuffing against the pavement. The sound came again, weaker this time, like a prayer whispered into the wind. "Hello," Emma called out, her voice small and uncertain. Her mother's warnings echoed in her mind. Never talk to strangers, come straight home, don't stop for anything. But this wasn't a stranger. This was someone in pain. Emma's heart hammered in her chest as she followed the sound to a rusted green dumpster positioned against a graffiti-covered brick wall. The smell hit her first, a nauseating mixture of rotting garbage, blood, and something else she couldn't identify. Her stomach churned, but she forced herself forward, compelled by a courage she didn't know she possessed. Behind the dumpster, partially hidden by discarded boxes and trash bags, lay a sight that would haunt Emma's dreams for years to come. A pit bull, once probably majestic and strong, lay dying in a pool of his own blood. His white and brown coat was matted with dirt, blood, and infected wounds that oozed yellow pus. Deep gashes crisscrossed his body, some fresh and bleeding, others scabbed over with flies buzzing around them. But what made Emma's blood run cold was the heavy chain embedded so deeply into the dog's neck that it had become part of his flesh, creating a grotesque collar of metal and infection. The dog's breathing was shallow and ragged. His ribs protruded sharply through his skin, evidence of prolonged starvation. One eye was swollen completely shut, and his left front leg bent at an unnatural angle. He was, by any measure, beyond saving. But when Emma knelt beside him, carefully avoiding the broken glass scattered around, the dog's one good eye slowly opened. It was brown, warm, and despite everything he'd endured, it held no hatred. Only exhaustion and a quiet plea, "Please, don't hurt me anymore." "Oh no, oh no, oh no," Emma whispered, her voice breaking. Tears blurred her vision as she took in the full extent of his suffering. Her small hands hovered over his body, wanting desperately to comfort him but afraid of causing more pain. She noticed scars, dozens of them, old wounds that told a story of systematic abuse and torture. This wasn't an accident or neglect. Someone had done this deliberately. The dog's tail, or what remained of it, gave the faintest twitch. Not a wag exactly, but an acknowledgement. He saw her. He knew she was there. "I'm Emma," she said softly, her voice trembling. "What's your name?" The dog's breathing hitched, and for a terrifying moment Emma thought he'd died. But then his chest rose again, fighting for one more breath, one more moment of life. Emma's mind raced. She needed help. She needed an adult. But she also knew that if she left him, he might not be alive when she returned. The thought of this beautiful, broken soul dying alone in the garbage, surrounded by trash and pain, made something inside her snap. She gently placed her small hand on the only part of his body that seemed uninjured, a small patch of fur on his shoulder. "I'm going to save you," she promised, her voice gaining strength. "I don't know how, but I promise you won't die here. Not alone. Not like this." The dog's eye focused on her face, and Emma could swear she saw understanding there. Maybe even hope. She stood up, her pink t-shirt now stained with blood and dirt, and made a decision that would ripple through hundreds of lives. Emma, who was afraid of the dark, who still slept with her, who cried when she saw sad commercials, decided in that moment that she would move heaven and earth for this dying dog. "Stay alive," she whispered urgently. Please just stay alive, I'll be right back." Emma ran. She ran faster than she'd ever run in her life, her backpack slapping against her back, her lungs burning, tears streaming down her face. She burst through the front door of their small apartment, screaming at the top of her lungs. "Mom, Mommy, please, there's a dog. He's dying. Please, we have to help HIM." Sarah emerged from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, alarm crossing her face. "Emma, what?" "Please," Emma grabbed her mother's hand, yanking her toward the door. "He's dying right now. Mom, please, we can't let him die, please." Sarah had never seen her daughter like this, wild-eyed, desperate, covered in blood and filth. "Slow down, what dog, where?" "The alley, behind the dumpster. Mom, he has a chain in his neck and he's bleeding and he's going to die if we don't help him right now." The raw anguish in her daughter's voice made Sarah's decision. She grabbed her car keys and purse. "Show me." As they ran back to the alley, Emma's mind was singularly focused on one thought. Please still be alive. Please. Just hold on a little longer. The race against death had begun, and neither Emma nor her mother knew that this moment, this one act of compassion, would soon bring an army of unlikely angels roaring to their doorstep. Sarah's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she sped through Phoenix traffic, her beat-up Civic weaving between cars with desperate urgency. In the backseat, Emma cradled the dying pit bull's head in her lap, her small hands stained crimson, whispering an endless stream of encouragement. "You're doing so good, stay with me. We're almost there, don't give up, please don't give up." The dog's breathing had become alarmingly shallow, each breath a rattling gasp that seemed like it might be his last. Blood soaked through the old blanket Sarah had wrapped him in, pooling on the car's fabric seats. The smell was overwhelming, infection, decay, and suffering, but Emma didn't flinch. Her eyes remained locked on the dog's face, willing him to hold on. "Mom, drive faster." Emma's voice cracked with panic as the dog's eye rolled back. "I'm trying, baby." Sarah's voice was tight with fear. She'd called ahead to Desert Valley Emergency Veterinary Clinic, and the receptionist's words echoed in her mind. "Get him here immediately. We'll be ready." Sarah glanced in the mirror and her heart broke. Her daughter, her baby girl who still believed in fairy tales and happy endings, was covered in blood and fighting desperately to keep a stranger's dog alive. Emma had always been sensitive, crying over injured birds, rescuing earthworms from puddles, leaving out water for stray cats. But this was different. This was a fierce, protective love that Sarah had never witnessed before. "2 more minutes," Sarah said, running a red light. "Just 2 more minutes." They screeched into the clinic parking lot at 4:47 p.m. Before Sarah could even turn off the engine, 2 veterinary technicians burst through the doors with a stretcher. Emma refused to let go, climbing onto the stretcher alongside the dog as they rushed him inside. "Baby, you need to let them work," Sarah began. "No," Emma's voice was absolute. "I promised him I wouldn't leave." The technicians exchanged glances but didn't argue. They'd seen enough trauma to know that sometimes love was the best medicine. Dr. Carlos Martinez, a veteran veterinarian with 23 years of experience, met them in the examination room. He was a tall man with kind eyes and steady hands, but when he saw the dog, his professional composure faltered. He breathed, pulling on latex gloves. His experienced eyes swept over the animal, cataloging injuries with grim efficiency. "How long has he been like this?" "I found him maybe 40 minutes ago," Emma said, her voice surprisingly steady now. "Behind a dumpster in the alley near 9th Street. Dr. Martinez began his examination, his jaw tightening with each discovery. "This dog has been systematically abused," he said quietly, anger threading through his professional tone. "These scars, they're from fighting, dog fighting." He pointed to the chain embedded in the neck. This was probably his tether. They chained them up between fights, often without food or water. Sarah felt sick. Emma's grip on the dog's paw tightened. The examination continued in tense silence. Dr. Martinez listened to the heart, irregular and weak. He examined the broken leg, the infected wounds, the severe malnutrition. Finally, he stepped back and removed his gloves, his expression grave. "I need to be honest with you," he said, crouching down to Emma's eye level. "This dog is in critical condition. He has at least 3 broken ribs, a shattered front leg, severe infection throughout his body, and he's lost a dangerous amount of blood. The chain has caused deep tissue damage and infection. He's severely malnourished and dehydrated." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'd estimate his chances of survival at less than 10%. Even if we operate immediately, even if we do everything right, he probably won't make it through the night." "Then we do everything," Emma said immediately, her voice unwavering. "Everything." Dr. Martinez looked at Sarah, and she saw the question in his eyes, the one she'd been dreading. "Emergency surgery, blood transfusions, intensive care. We're looking at a minimum of $2,300 for tonight alone, and that's if he survives. There will be additional costs for ongoing treatment, medications, follow-up surgeries." "How much to save his life?" Sarah interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Realistically, we could be looking at $5,000 to $7,000 total, maybe more depending on complications." Sarah's mind reeled. She had exactly $2,847 in her checking account, rent money for their apartment, due in 5 days. Money she'd scraped together from working double shifts at the diner and weekend housekeeping jobs. Money that stood between her daughter and homelessness. She looked at Emma, who was staring at her with those big, hopeful brown eyes. Her daughter, who had never asked for much, who wore hand-me-down clothes without complaint, who understood they couldn't afford the fancy toys her classmates had. "Mom," Emma whispered, "I know we don't have a lot of money, I know this is hard, but I can't let him die. I looked into his eyes and I promised him, I promised." In that moment, Sarah made a decision that all logic and financial sense. She made a choice that any responsible adult would call foolish, reckless, and irresponsible. She made a choice based purely on the look in her daughter's eyes and the conviction that some things mattered more than money. "Save him," Sarah said firmly, pulling out her debit card with shaking hands. "Do whatever it takes, save him." Dr. Martinez nodded, respect flickering in his eyes. "We'll do our best." As the team prepped for emergency surgery, Emma pressed her face against the operating room window. The dog, her dog now, though she hadn't yet put it into words, was barely visible beneath the surgical drapes and equipment. "I'm going to call you Justice," Emma whispered against the glass, her breath fogging it up. "Because you deserve justice for what they did to you, and because you're going to fight. We both are." Inside the operating room, Dr. Martinez made his first incision. The battle for Justice's life had begun. Outside, Sarah held her daughter close, both of them praying to whatever power might be listening that love and desperation could somehow be enough to cheat death. Neither of them knew that this moment, this impossible choice to save one broken soul, would soon set into motion a chain of events that would prove miracles still existed in the world. The surgery would take 4 hours, the longest 4 hours of Emma's young life. 3 days after Justice's surgery, Sarah sat at her tiny kitchen table at 2:00 a.m., surrounded by bills she couldn't pay. The glow from her laptop screen illuminated her exhausted face as she stared at her bank account balance, $547.32. Rent was due in 2 days. The number needed to be $1,850. She'd already called her landlord Mr., a heavy-set man with zero sympathy and a strict policy about late payments. "You know the rules, Sarah. First of the month, no exceptions. I've got a waiting list of people who can pay on time." Sarah buried her face in her hands. She'd worked at diner for 6 years, pulling double shifts, sacrificing sleep and her social life to provide for Emma after her husband walked out. She'd clawed her way to stability, never missing a payment, never asking for handouts. And now one choice, one moment of compassion, had brought it all crashing down. But when she thought about the alternative, when she imagined telling Emma they should have left Justice to die in that alley, she knew she'd make the same choice again. Some things were worth the risk. Down the hall, Emma lay awake in her small bedroom, clutching the stuffed bear her father had given her before he disappeared. She'd heard her mother crying in the kitchen. Emma wasn't stupid. She understood what saving Justice had cost them, and she was determined to fix it. The next morning, while Sarah was at work, Emma began her campaign. She started in her bedroom, pulling out every toy she owned. The Barbie dolls she'd gotten for Christmas 3 years ago, the board games with missing pieces, the art supplies she treasured, her bicycle, the one her mom had saved for months to buy. Everything went into boxes. "What are you doing?" Mrs. from next door asked, finding Emma dragging boxes onto the sidewalk. "Yard sale," Emma announced, her jaw set with determination. "I need to make money." Mrs.'s eyes softened. She'd heard about the dog, about the surgery the whole neighborhood had. "Oh, sweetie." $3 for the bike, Emma said. $2 for the Barbies, everything must go. By the end of the day, Emma had made $43. She counted it 3 times, her heart sinking. It wasn't nearly enough, but she wasn't done. Emma started waking up at 5:30 a.m., an hour before school. She'd walk through the neighborhood with a handmade sign. "We'll do chores for money. Serious inquiries only." Mr. hired her to pull weeds for $5. Mrs. paid her $7 to wash her car. Old Mr., who lived alone on the corner, gave her $10 to read to him for an hour because his eyes were failing. At school, Emma set up a lemonade stand, but instead of keeping the profits, she made a sign, "Help Justice the Rescue Dog." She told her story to anyone who would listen, showing pictures on her mom's old phone. By Friday, she'd raised $87. Her teacher, Ms. Henderson, watched Emma with growing concern. The vibrant, cheerful girl had become gaunt and serious, dark circles forming under her eyes. During recess, while other children played, Emma counted coins. "Emma, honey, you need to rest," Ms. Henderson said gently. "I can't," Emma replied, her voice hollow. "We might lose our apartment, and Justice needs more treatment next week. Dr. Martinez said he needs physical therapy and special food," and her voice cracked. "It's my fault. I begged Mom to save him. Now we might be homeless." Ms. Henderson made a phone call that afternoon. By evening, a reporter from Channel 12 News named Tours was knocking on this door. The segment aired 3 days later during the 6 o'clock news. The footage was devastating in its simplicity. 8-year-old Emma, surrounded by her sold belongings, explaining how she'd given up everything to save an abused fighting dog named Justice. The camera panned to Justice himself, still recovering, his scars visible, his gentle eyes watching Emma with absolute devotion. "I'd live in a cardboard box if it meant Justice gets to live," Emma told the camera, her voice steady and sure. "He didn't choose to be hurt. Someone was cruel to him, but I can choose to be kind. Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" Sarah watched the broadcast from the diner, tears streaming down her face. Her manager, a gruff man named Sal who claimed to have no heart, slipped her an extra $100 in her paycheck that week with a note. "For the dog. Don't make a big deal about it." The story touched hearts. Donations started trickling in, 20 here, $50 there. A local pet store donated food. The church Sarah occasionally attended took up a collection and raised $340. Emma's classmates brought their piggy banks. By the end of the week, they'd raised $1,200. It helped, it truly did, but it wasn't enough. Justice needed another surgery. The infection in his neck where the chain had been embedded wasn't healing properly. Dr. Martinez, who'd been providing services at cost, sat them down with bad news. "The infection is spreading. We need to do a tissue debridement. Basically, we have to cut away the dead and infected flesh and rebuild the area. It's another $1,800 minimum." Sarah felt the world tilt. Even with the donations, Even with her working every shift available, the math didn't work. She'd already fallen behind on utilities. The eviction notice was posted on their door that morning. That night, Sarah sat in the bathroom, crying as quietly as she could so Emma wouldn't hear. She'd failed. Despite everything, despite the donations and Emma's superhuman efforts, they were going to lose their home, and Justice might not survive without the surgery. She didn't know that 300 miles away, in a garage in Tucson, a man named Wrench was watching Emma's story on the news for the 5th time, his weathered face wet with tears. His German Shepherd, Sergeant, rested his head on Wrench's knee, sensing his owner's emotion. "This kid," Wrench muttered, his voice thick, "this kid has more courage than half the Marines I served with." He picked up his phone and started making calls. "Tiny, yeah, it's Wrench. You see that news story about the little girl in Phoenix, the one with the fighting dog?" He paused. Yeah, that one. Call the charter, emergency meeting, tonight. We're gonna fix this." Sarah didn't know that hope was coming. She didn't know that an army was mobilizing. She only knew that tomorrow she'd have to tell her daughter they might lose Justice after all, that sometimes love wasn't enough. But she was wrong. Sometimes love was exactly enough, especially when it inspired others to act. The storm was coming, and it rode on chrome and thunder. Wrench's garage in Tucson smelled like motor oil, leather, and old coffee. At 52 years old, his hands were from 2 tours in Afghanistan and 30 years of working on motorcycles. His gray beard was trimmed military short, and his arms told stories in ink, Marine Corps insignia, fallen brothers' names, and prominently on his right forearm, a German Shepherd with the words, "Rescued is my favorite breed." The small TV mounted in the corner of his garage played the news on repeat. Wrench had watched Emma's story 7 times now, and each viewing hit harder than the last. "Boss, you gonna wear out that remote," came a gravelly voice from the doorway. James Tiny, 6'5", 300 pounds of solid muscle, leaned against the frame holding 2 beers. Wrench didn't take his eyes off the screen. "Watch this, Tiny, just watch." They watched in silence as Emma explained selling her bike, her toys, everything she owned. When she said, "I'd live in a cardboard box if it meant Justice gets to live," Tiny's beer can crumpled in his massive fist. "That kid's what, 8 years old?" Tiny's voice cracked. "She's got more spine than most grown men I know." Wrench finally turned, his eyes red-rimmed. "You know why this is gutting me?" He gestured to Sergeant, his German Shepherd sleeping peacefully on an old blanket. 7 years ago, I found Sergeant chained to a fence in 110-degree heat. No water, no shade. Owner was using him for protection, beating him when he barked. I cut that chain and never looked back." "I remember," Tiny said quietly. "You drove him straight to the vet, spent your whole disability check saving him." "Damn right I did." Wrench stood, packing like a caged animal. "And you know what the worst part is? Nobody helped me, nobody. I went broke, almost lost my shop, ate ramen for 6 months straight. I did it alone because I had to." He jabbed a finger at the TV. "But this little girl, this angel who's sacrificing everything, she doesn't have to do it alone, not if I have anything to say about it." Tiny grinned, a fierce expression that had intimidated many. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we call a charter meeting. Tonight, every member of Desert Riders MC. And then we make some calls to every club we trust within 500 miles. The Guardians, Rescue Inc., Veterans MC. All of them. Anyone who's ever given a damn about protecting the innocent, whether they've got 2 legs or 4. Within 2 hours, Wrench's garage was packed. 23 members of the Desert Riders Motorcycle Club crowded into the space, leather vests bearing their patches, their faces weathered but their eyes sharp. These were men and women who'd lived hard lives, former military, recovering addicts, people who'd clawed their way back from darkness. They understood second chances. Wrench played the news segment on a larger screen. Silence fell as Emma's voice filled the garage. When it finished, a woman named Chain spoke first. At 45, she was the club's road captain and had more tattoos than anyone could count. "I know that look in that kid's eyes," she said, her voice rough from years of smoking. "That's the look of someone who refuses to quit even when the world's beating them down. I had that look when I got clean 15 years ago." "We all did," added Pops Wellington, the club's oldest member at 68. "That's the look of a fighter, and fighters don't abandon fighters." Wrench nodded. "Here's the situation. Single mom works 2 jobs, just spent her rent money saving this dog. They're facing eviction. The dog needs another surgery. This family is drowning, and that little girl is trying to bail out the ocean with a teaspoon." "What's the plan?" asked Danny Sketch Tours, the club's youngest member at 24. "We help, but we don't just throw money at it and disappear. We show up. We make sure this family knows they're not alone." Wrench's voice grew stronger. "Tomorrow morning we ride to Phoenix. Full charter, full colors. We show this little girl that her courage inspired an army." "How much are we talking?" asked Practically. Wrench had done the math. Medical bills, back rent, getting them stable. We're looking at around $15,000 to $20,000 minimum. The number hung in the air. These weren't wealthy people. They were mechanics, truckers, bartenders, working-class folks who understood struggle intimately. "I've got $500 I can spare," Tiny said immediately. "I'll match that," added. "Put me down for $300, said Pops. Around the room, pledges flew. Within minutes, they'd committed $8,200 from the chapter alone. But Wrench wasn't done. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. "Stone, it's Wrench from Desert Riders. You see that news story about the little girl in Phoenix?" He listened. "Yeah, that's the one. We're organizing a ride tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. her house. Bringing support donations, whatever we can muster. You in?" A pause. "Fantastic. Spread the word to your charter. Every rider who can make it." The calls continued. Guardians of the Children, a club dedicated to protecting abused kids. Rescue Inc., bikers focused on animal rescue. Veterans Motorcycle Club, Iron Legacy. Phoenix Rising MC. Each club president answered, listened, and pledged support. By midnight, Wrench had confirmations from 17 different motorcycle clubs across Arizona, New Mexico, and Southern California. The number of confirmed riders, 287. "We're going to show up 300 strong," Wrench announced, his voice filled with emotion. 300 riders for one 8-year-old girl who showed us what real courage looks like. Wiped her eyes. "This is going to change their lives." "It already has," Wrench said. "Tomorrow, we just make sure they know they're not alone anymore." The garage erupted in agreement, fists pounding on tables, voices raised in solidarity. Sergeant woke up and barked, caught up in the energy. Wrench pulled out a map of Phoenix and spread it on his workbench. "All right, listen up. We do this right. We do this respectful. No loud pipes before we get there. We roll in quiet until we're in position. We park in formation, tight and clean. When we approach the house, I go first alone. No overwhelming them." "What about the media?" Danny asked. "Let them come," said fiercely. "This story deserves to be told. Maybe it'll inspire other folks to help kids like Emma." As the meeting dispersed around 2 a.m., members headed home to prepare. They polished chrome, cleaned leather vests, and packed saddlebags with supplies. Some cried as they worked, thinking about their own rescue animals, their own struggles, their own moments when they needed help that never came. In Tucson, Wrench couldn't sleep. He sat with Sergeant, stroking the dog's fur, watching the news segment one more time. "Tomorrow we ride for her, boy," he whispered to his dog. "Tomorrow we show one little girl that heroes come in all shapes, sizes, and on 2 wheels." Sergeant's tail thumped against the floor. Across Arizona, in garages and driveways, 300 motorcycles were being prepared. 300 hearts were unified by one purpose: to prove to Emma that her act of courage had sparked something unstoppable. Dawn was coming, and with it, an army of leather and chrome, riding not for glory or recognition, but for something far more important, to protect a child who'd shown them what it truly meant to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. The Brotherhood was ready. Tomorrow they would answer the call. Emma woke up at 6:47 a.m. to Justice licking her face. The dog still moved slowly, his wounds healing but visible, but his spirit was returning. She wrapped her arms around his neck, careful to avoid the bandaged area where the chain had been. "Good morning, Justice," she whispered. "We're going to be okay. Somehow we're going to be okay." She didn't believe her own words. Last night she'd overheard her mother on the phone with Grandma sobbing. The eviction was final. They had until Friday to leave. 3 days. Sarah was already awake in the kitchen, staring at a cup of cold coffee. She hadn't slept. The weight of her failures pressed down like a physical force. She tried so hard to give Emma a stable life, and one choice, one beautiful, impossible choice, had destroyed everything. "Mom!" Emma appeared in the doorway, Justice limping beside her. Sarah forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Morning, baby. Want some breakfast?" "Are we going to be okay?" The question hung in the air. Sarah wanted to lie, to protect her daughter from the harsh truth a little longer, but Emma deserved honesty. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, her voice breaking, "but we have each other, and we have Justice. That's something, right?" Emma nodded, fighting tears. "That's everything." At 8:43 a.m., Sarah was washing dishes when she heard it, a sound like distant thunder rolling across the desert. She froze, soapy water dripping from her hands. The sound grew louder, deeper, more insistent. It wasn't thunder. It was engines. "Mom," Emma called from her bedroom, confusion in her voice. "What's that noise?" The rumble intensified, shaking the windows in their frames. Sarah dried her hands and walked to the front window, pulling back the faded curtain. What she saw made her knees buckle. Motorcycles, dozens of them. No, hundreds. They stretched down the entire block, chrome gleaming in the morning sun, engines growling in synchronized harmony. Riders in leather vests sat astride their bikes, standing at attention like soldiers awaiting orders. Sarah breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. What is it?" Emma rushed to the window, Justice hobbling behind her. When she saw the sea of motorcycles, her eyes went wide. "Mom, what's happening?" More bikes continued to arrive, filling every available space on the street. Neighbors emerged from their houses, phones out, filming the unprecedented sight. Some riders held signs, "Justice for Justice." "We stand with Emma. Courage has no age limit." Among the crowd, Sarah could see different club patches: Desert Riders, Guardians of the Children, Rescue Inc., Veterans MC, Phoenix Rising. She counted at least 15 different clubs, all unified in formation. Are they here for us?" Emma whispered, her voice small and uncertain. Before Sarah could answer, the engines cut off in perfect unison. The sudden silence was deafening. 300 riders dismounted, standing beside their bikes. Some had tears streaming down their weathered faces. Others stood at military attention, hands over their hearts. From the center of the formation, a tall man with a gray beard began walking toward their house. He moved with purpose but not aggression, his leather vest bearing the patch, President Desert Riders MC. Behind him, the entire crowd remained motionless, watching. Sarah's heart hammered. She didn't know whether to be terrified or hopeful. Her hand instinctively found Emma's shoulder, pulling her daughter close. The man reached their front door and knocked. 3 gentle raps that seemed impossibly soft coming from such an imposing figure. Sarah's hands shook as she opened the door, keeping Emma partially behind her. Up close, she could see the man's eyes, steel gray but impossibly kind, with crow's feet that spoke of years of laughter and sun. "Mrs." His voice was gravelly but warm. "My name is, most people call me Wrench. I'm the president of the Desert Riders Motorcycle Club." He gestured to the army behind him. We We saw your daughter's story on the news." Sarah couldn't find words. Her throat had closed completely. Wrench's eyes found Emma, who peeked around her mother's waist. His tough expression crumbled and tears welled up. "You must be Emma." Emma nodded, clutching Justice's collar. The dog pressed against her leg protectively. Wrench crouched down, bringing himself to Emma's eye level. "Young lady, I'm a United States Marine. I've served 2 tours overseas. I've met generals, senators, and war heroes." His voice cracked with emotion. "But I have never, and I mean never, met anyone as brave as you." I don't understand," Emma whispered. "Why are you here?" Wrench wiped his eyes, not ashamed of his tears. "Because 3 days ago, I watched you on TV telling the world you'd live in a cardboard box to save that dog. And you know what I thought? I thought, that little girl understands something most adults never learn. She understands that courage isn't about being big or strong. It's about doing the right thing when nobody's watching, when there's no reward, when it costs you everything." He stood and turned to face the assembled riders. "Every person here, all 297 of us, we've all been broken at some point. We've all needed saving. Some of us were saved by other people, some by our dogs, some by second chances we didn't deserve." He turned back to Emma. "When we saw you save Justice, you reminded us what it means to be human. You reminded us that one small act of courage can change the world." "We're here," Wrench continued, his voice carrying across the street, "because you and your mom shouldn't have to fight this battle alone. We're here because that's what family does. And as of right now, Emma, your family." Behind him, 300 voices erupted in agreement, fists pumped in the air. Some riders openly wept. Sarah's legs gave out. She sank to her knees in the doorway, sobbing. Emma knelt beside her, wrapping her small arms around her mother. We can't." Sarah couldn't form complete sentences. "You don't have to say anything," Wrench said gently. He pulled an envelope from his vest pocket. "This is from all of us, every club, every rider. We took up a collection." Sarah opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was cash, thick stacks of bills, and a note written in neat handwriting, "For Emma and Justice, for showing us what heroes look like. With respect and gratitude, the Brotherhood." She didn't count it. She couldn't. Tears blurred her vision completely. Emma stepped forward, looking up at Wrench with those big brown eyes that had started this entire movement. "Thank you," she said simply. "Justice thanks you too." As if understanding, Justice took a tentative step forward and sat at Wrench's feet, his tail wagging for the first time since his rescue. Wrench knelt again, scratching Justice behind the ears. "Hey there, warrior, you picked the right kid to save you." He looked up at Emma. "And you picked the right dog to save. You two were meant to find each other." From the street, a voice called out, "3 cheers for Emma." The roar that followed shook the neighborhood. Windows rattled. Car alarms activated. 300 voices shouting Emma's name in unison, celebrating her courage, her sacrifice, her unwavering love for a broken soul that everyone else had given up on. Emma, 8 years old, stood in her doorway surrounded by an army of strangers who had become family. And for the first time in weeks, she believed everything might actually be okay. The miracles were just beginning. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled the cash from the envelope. She counted once, twice, 3 times, certain she was making a mistake. But the number remained the same, $18,000. This can't be real," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This is too much, we can't." "You already have," Wrench interrupted gently but firmly. "The moment you spent your rent money to save that dog, the moment your daughter sold everything she owned, you already accepted help. You just didn't know it was coming." Jane stepped forward from the crowd, her weathered face streaked with tears. "Honey, I've been where you are. 15 years ago, I was living in my car with my daughter. A stranger gave me $200 and told me to pay it forward someday. This," she gestured to the money, "this is us paying it forward." "But there's more," Wrench continued. He turned and whistled sharply. A man in a Rescue Inc. vest stepped forward, leading a woman in veterinary scrubs. "Mrs., this is Dr. Jennifer. She owns Paws and Wheels Emergency Veterinary Clinic on the East Side." Doctor smiled warmly, her eyes immediately finding Justice. "I heard about your boy here. Wrench called me last night." She knelt beside Justice, running expert hands over his healing wounds. "What you and your daughter did, it's extraordinary. My clinic specializes in rescue cases." She looked up at Sarah. "I want to offer Justice lifetime veterinary care, completely free. All surgeries, medications, checkups, everything, for as long as he lives." Sarah's knees buckled again. Emma caught her mother's arm, her own eyes wide with disbelief. "But the surgery he needs," Sarah began. "Already scheduled for Monday morning," doctor said. "The infection will be gone within 2 weeks. I guarantee it." Before Sarah could process this, another rider approached. This one was younger, maybe 30, with kind eyes and a Phoenix Rising MC patch. "Ma'am, my name's David. I own property management. We manage about 40 rental units in Phoenix." He pulled out a document. "I spoke with your landlord this morning. Mister has agreed to sell me your building. As of today, I'm your new landlord." He handed her the paper. "This is a 6-month rent forgiveness agreement. You don't pay a dime until August. And when you do start paying, your rent is reduced by 30%, permanently." Sarah couldn't breathe. The world was tilting, reality bending in impossible ways. "Why?" she gasped. "Why would you do this?" David's expression grew serious. "Because my sister was in an abusive relationship. Nobody helped her. Nobody stood up for her when she needed it most. She didn't make it." His voice cracked. "Your daughter stood up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves. That's the kind of courage that deserves to be rewarded. That's the kind of person I want as a tenant." Emma burst into tears, burying her face in Justice's fur. The dog, sensing the emotion, whined softly and licked her face. But the miracles kept coming. Tiny approached, his massive frame somehow gentle as he knelt beside Emma. "Little warrior, I've got something for you." He pulled out a small leather jacket, child-sized, with careful stitching and patches. On the back, embroidered in silver thread, were the words, "Emma's Angels Honorary Desert Rider." "You're one of us now," Tiny rumbled, his deep voice thick with emotion. "You wear these colors, and you've got 300 brothers and sisters who will ride to the ends of the earth for you." Emma took the jacket with shaking hands, slipping it on. It fit perfectly. She looked up at Tiny, this giant of a man with tears streaming down his face, and threw her arms around his waist. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you so much." The dam broke. Riders surged forward, not aggressively but with offerings. Gift bags appeared, dog toys for Justice, stuffed animals for Emma, gift cards to grocery stores, Target, gas stations. A woman from Guardians of the Children presented Emma with a beautiful leather-bound journal. "For your story," she said, "because what you did deserves to be remembered." Another rider, an older man with a veteran's MC patch in one arm, handed Sarah an envelope. "College fund," he said simply. "Started it this morning. Already got $5,000 committed from various donors. Your girl's going to college and she won't have to worry about money." News vans had arrived, cameras capturing everything. Tours from Channel 12, who'd first covered Emma's story, was openly crying as she filmed. This wasn't just news anymore. This was a movement. Wrench raised his hand and the crowd quieted instantly. "There's one more thing." He turned to Emma, his expression tender. "Emma, on behalf of every club here, every rider who came today, and every person whose heart you've touched, we want to make you an official junior member of the Brotherhood. You'll have protection, support, and family for life. Do you accept?" Emma looked at her mother, who nodded through her tears. Then Emma looked at Justice, who sat proudly beside her, his scars visible but his eyes bright and trusting. "Yes," Emma said, her voice small but sure, "I accept." The roar from 300 throats shook the neighborhood. Engines fired up in celebration, a thunderous symphony of support. Neighbors cheered from their porches. Children ran into the street, laughing and pointing. Mister from the corner store stood in his doorway, wiping his eyes. Stepped forward with a leather vest small enough for a child but bearing an official patch. She draped it over Emma's shoulders. "Your family now, little sister, forever." Emma was passed from rider to rider, each one hugging her, thanking her, telling her she'd changed their lives. Justice followed, his tail wagging, accepting pets and treats from these leather-clad angels who descended upon their broken world and made it whole again. One rider, a woman with graying hair and deep laugh lines, knelt beside Emma. 20 years ago, I was ready to end my life. A stray dog found me that night and wouldn't leave my side. That dog saved me. I named her Hope." She smiled through tears. "You saved Justice, but sweetheart, you've also saved us. You reminded us why we ride, why we fight, why we protect. You reminded us that compassion is the strongest force in the universe." As the morning stretched into afternoon, the bikers didn't leave. They stayed, sharing stories, playing with Justice, teaching Emma about their motorcycles. Wrench lifted her onto his bike, letting her sit in the rider's seat while he explained the controls. "Someday," he said with a grin, "when you're old enough, I'll teach you to ride. And you'll lead rides for rescues just like we do." Sarah watched from the porch, overwhelmed and grateful and still slightly in shock. These strangers, these intimidating, leather-clad, tattooed bikers, had proven to be the kindest people she'd ever met. They'd saved her family when the world had turned its back. As the sun began to set and riders prepared to leave, they formed a line, each one stopping to shake Emma's hand or hug her goodbye. 300 individual farewells, 300 promises to stay in touch, 300 hearts forever changed by one little girl's courage. Justice sat beside Emma throughout, his head held high, wearing a new collar emblazoned with his name and the words, "Survivor, Fighter, Loved." The last to leave was Wrench. He knelt one final time, looking Emma in the eyes. "You've got my number. You ever need anything at all, you call me, day or night. Understand?" Emma nodded, then surprised him by whispering, "Can I ask you something?" "Anything, kiddo. Will you teach me how to help other animals, like Justice?" Wrench's face broke into the widest smile. "Emma, it would be my greatest honor." As the motorcycles rumbled away into the desert sunset, Sarah held her daughter close, Justice between them. They stood in the doorway of their home, a home they no longer had to leave, and watched their new family disappear into the horizon. "Mom," Emma whispered. "Yes, baby. I think Justice and I just started something really big." Sarah kissed her daughter's head. "I think you're right." They didn't know it yet, but Emma was absolutely correct. This was just the beginning. 3 weeks after the bikers arrived, Emma's life had transformed in ways she never imagined possible. It started small. A Facebook post from Tours sharing the story went viral, accumulating 4.3 million views in 72 hours. Then came the emails. Hundreds of them. Thousands. People from across the country wrote to Emma, sharing their own rescue stories, their own struggles, their own moments of choosing compassion over convenience. A firefighter from Maine sent photos of the 3-legged cat he'd rescued from a burning building. A grandmother from Florida told how Emma's story inspired her to adopt a senior dog from a kill shelter. A veteran from Texas wrote that watching Emma's courage helped him get the therapy dog he desperately needed, but had been too proud to accept. But the most important letter came from a place Emma never expected, the Arizona State Legislature. Sarah opened the thick envelope with the official seal, her hands shaking. Inside was a letter from State Senator Mendoza. "Dear Emma, your act of courage has inspired our office to take action. We are drafting legislation to increase penalties for animal fighting and abuse. We would be honored if you would testify before the state Senate. Your voice matters. Your story can change laws and save lives." Emma read the letter 3 times, Justice's head resting on her lap. "Mom, what does testify mean?" It means they want you to tell your story to the people who make laws, Sarah explained, her voice filled with pride and terror. But baby, you don't have to. This is a big thing. Lots of adults would be scared. I'll do it, Emma said immediately, her jaw set with the same determination Sarah had seen that day in the alley. If it helps other animals like Justice, I'll do it. Wrench, who had become a daily presence in their lives, helped Emma prepare. He sat with her at their kitchen table, his massive frame somehow fitting into the small chair, coaching her through what to say. Just tell the truth, kiddo. Tell them about finding justice. Tell them what you felt. Tell them why it mattered. His eyes were gentle. You've got more power in your voice than you know. Meanwhile, Justice's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Doctor's surgery had been successful. The infection was gone and new tissue was healing beautifully. Justice had gained 23 pounds of healthy weight. His coat, once matted and dull, now gleamed. The fear in his eyes had been replaced with trust and joy. But the most remarkable change was Justice's new purpose. Doctor had suggested it first. Emma, Justice has the perfect temperament for therapy work. He's gentle, patient, and resilient. With his story, he could help children who experience trauma understand they can heal too. 6 weeks after his rescue, Justice became a certified therapy dog. Emma and Justice began visiting Phoenix Children's Hospital every Saturday morning. In the pediatric oncology ward, Justice would rest his head on hospital beds, letting sick children stroke his fur while Emma told his story. "See this scar," Emma would say, showing them Justice's healed wounds. "This is where he was hurt really bad, but he didn't give up, and now he's here helping you, because survivors help survivors." One little boy named, 7 years old and battling leukemia, bonded instantly with Justice. He'd lost all his hair from chemotherapy and was withdrawn, barely speaking. But when Justice laid beside his bed, opened up. "Does it hurt?" whispered, touching Justice's scars. "Not anymore," Emma said gently. "It did once, but love healed him. Love and time and people who cared." His eyes filled with tears. "Will I heal too?" Emma took his hand. "Yes, you're a fighter just like Justice, and fighters don't quit." 3 months later went into remission. His mother sent Emma a photo of at home hugging Justice, both of them smiling. The caption read, "My son's hero. Thank you for showing him that broken things can become beautiful again." The story continued to spread. Wrench and the Desert Riders organized Justice's Journey, a charity motorcycle ride from Phoenix to Tucson and back, raising funds for animal rescue organizations. Over 800 riders participated. They raised $67,000 in a single day. From that fund, they created the Emma Animal Rescue Scholarship, a $10,000 annual award for young people pursuing careers in veterinary medicine or animal welfare. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl named Sophia who'd been rescuing stray cats since she was Emma's age. At school, Emma became a completely different person. Once shy and quiet, she now led the Justice League, an anti-animal cruelty club with 147 members across 3 elementary schools. They organized adoption events, raised money for shelter animals, and educated classmates about responsible pet ownership. Ms. Henderson, Emma's teacher, watched in amazement as her student blossomed. "Emma, I'm so proud of you. You've started a movement." But not everything was easy. Some nights, Emma still had nightmares about finding Justice dying in that alley. She'd wake up crying, convinced she'd been too late, that Justice had died alone in the garbage. Sarah would hold her, and Justice would climb onto the bed, something normally forbidden, and press against Emma until her breathing steadied. "I'm here," Sarah would whisper. "Justice is here. You saved him. You did the impossible." On the morning of Emma's 9th birthday, 6 months after the rescue, she woke to an enormous surprise. In their driveway sat a custom-painted motorcycle sidecar, sized perfectly for a child, with Emma's angels painted on the side in silver and pink. Attached was a note from Wrench. For when you're ready to ride alongside us. Until then, Justice can ride in style. Happy birthday, kiddo. You've changed more lives than you'll ever know. Wrench and the Brotherhood. The sidecar was designed for Justice. That afternoon, Emma and Justice took their first ride with the Desert Riders, Justice sitting proudly in his sidecar, wearing protective goggles that made Emma laugh until she cried with joy. As they rode through Phoenix, people stopped and stared. Children pointed. Drivers honked and waved. Everyone recognized the little girl and the pit bull who'd reminded the world that courage could come from the smallest, most unexpected places. At a stoplight, an elderly woman approached Emma. "Are you the girl who saved that dog?" Emma nodded, expecting another thank you or congratulations. Instead, the woman's eyes filled with tears. "Because of you, I adopted a senior dog last month. She was going to be euthanized, too old, they said. Nobody wanted her." She pulled out her phone, showing a photo of a gray-muzzled golden retriever. "Her name is Hope. She sleeps in my bed every night. For the first time in 10 years since my husband died, I'm not alone. You did that. Your courage gave me courage." Emma felt tears streaming down her face. "What's her name, your dog?" "I named her Emma," the woman said, smiling, "after you." As the light turned green and the motorcycles rumbled forward, Emma looked down at Justice in his sidecar. He looked back at her with those warm brown eyes that had once held only pain and fear. Now they held love, trust, and purpose. "We're changing the world, Justice," Emma whispered into the wind. And they were, one heart, one life, one rescue at a time. But the biggest moment was still to come. In 2 weeks, Emma would stand before the Arizona State Legislature and speak words that would echo across the nation, transforming her story from a local miracle into a catalyst for change that would protect thousands of animals for generations to come. The little girl who'd refused to let one dog die alone was about to prove that even the smallest voice, when filled with conviction and love, could move mountains. The Arizona State Capitol building loomed massive and intimidating against the brilliant blue sky. Emma stood on the marble steps, her small hand gripping her mother's tightly. She wore her best dress, a simple blue one that Sarah had bought especially for this day, and over it her Desert Rider's jacket. Justice sat beside her in his official therapy dog vest, calm and regal despite the crowds. Behind them stood Wrench and over 200 members of the Motorcycle Brotherhood. They'd ridden from across the state to be here, to support their little sister on the most important day of her young life. News crews lined the plaza. Cameras flashed, but Emma's focus was singular. "You ready, kiddo?" Wrench asked gently, kneeling beside her. Emma looked up at the building where laws were made, where powerful adults decided the fate of millions. She was 9 years old, barely 4 feet tall, and about to tell those powerful adults why they needed to change. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "Justice and I are ready." The legislative chamber was imposing. High ceilings, polished wood, rows of seats filled with senators and representatives in expensive suits. Emma walked down the center aisle, Justice's leash in her hand, Sarah on her other side. Every eye in the room followed them. Senator Mendoza, a dignified woman in her 50s with kind eyes, smiled warmly as Emma approached the witness table. A microphone stood at adult height, and a clerk quickly adjusted it downward for the child who would use it. "Members of the Senate," Senator Mendoza announced, her voice carrying through the chamber, "I present Emma and Justice, here to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 2847, the Animal Fighting and Abuse Prevention Act." Emma climbed onto the chair. It was too big for her, her feet dangling several inches above the floor. Justice sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. She looked out at the sea of faces, some skeptical, some curious, some already moved to tears. She cleared her throat and began. "My name is Emma. I'm 9 years old. 7 months ago, I found Justice dying in an alley behind a dumpster. Her voice wavered slightly, but she pushed forward. He had a chain embedded in his neck. He had wounds all over his body. He was starving. The vet said he probably wouldn't survive the night. The chamber was utterly silent. Justice was used in dogfighting. People bet money while dogs hurt each other. When Justice couldn't fight anymore, they threw him away like garbage. Emma's voice grew stronger, fueled by righteous anger. But Justice wasn't garbage. He was a life. He was someone who deserved love and safety and kindness. She reached down and touched Justice's head. The dog looked up at her with complete trust. When I found Justice, I had a choice. I could walk away. I could pretend I didn't see him. Lots of people had already walked past him, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't leave him there to die alone. Emma looked directly at the senators. My mom spent our rent money to save him. We almost lost our home. I sold all my toys. We struggled. But we didn't give up on Justice because lives matter. All lives. Even the ones that other people throw away. Tears streamed down several senators' faces. A few removed their glasses to wipe their eyes. Justice didn't just survive. He became a therapy dog. He visits sick kids at the hospital. He helps people who are sad or scared. Last month, a little boy with cancer told me that Justice gave him hope, that if Justice could survive and become strong, maybe he could too. Emma's voice cracked with emotion. That little boy is in remission now. Justice helped save him just like I saved Justice. She paused, gathering her courage for the final push. The people who hurt Justice are still free. The law said what they did was only a misdemeanor. That means they barely got punished. They could do it again to another dog, and they probably will because nobody stopped them. Emma's eyes blazed with fierce determination. That's not justice. That's not right. And I'm here to ask you, to beg you, to change the law so no other dog has to suffer like Justice did. She stood up on her chair, making herself taller, her voice ringing through the chamber with unexpected power. I'm just a kid. I can't vote, I can't make laws, but I can tell you the truth. Animals feel pain, they feel fear, they deserve protection, and people who torture them for money or entertainment should go to prison, not just pay a fine. She looked around the room, making eye contact with senator after senator. Please, please make this right. Please give Justice and every animal like him the justice they deserve. Emma sat down, her heart pounding. Justice placed his head in her lap, and she buried her fingers in his fur, drawing strength from him. The chamber erupted. Senators rose to their feet, applauding. Some openly wept. The gallery, filled with bikers, animal advocates, and ordinary citizens, roared their approval. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. Senator Mendoza wiped her eyes and spoke into her microphone. I move that we vote immediately on Senate Bill 2847. The vote was unanimous, 46-0. Justice's law was born. 2 weeks later, Governor Jennifer Hayes signed the legislation in a ceremony at the Capitol. Emma stood beside the governor as she signed, Justice sitting proudly between them. The new law made animal fighting a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison and $10,000 in fines. It mandated counseling for offenders and created a statewide animal abuse registry. But the ripple effects went far beyond Arizona. Within 6 months, 12 other states introduced similar legislation, citing Emma's testimony. National news networks featured her story. The Humane Society of the United States created the Emma Award for Youth Animal Advocacy. Emma was invited to speak at schools, conferences, and events across the country. The Desert Riders Motorcycle Club established the Justice Fund, a permanent endowment providing grants to animal rescue organizations. In the first year alone, it saved over 3,000 animals from euthanasia. Emma's Justice League Club expanded to 47 schools across Arizona, with over 2,000 student members dedicated to animal welfare and anti-cruelty education. But perhaps the most profound change was personal. On the 1-year anniversary of finding Justice, Emma and Sarah stood in that same alley where it had all begun. The dumpster was still there, the graffiti-covered wall unchanged, but everything else was different. Wrench and the entire Desert Riders Charter stood with them, along with news crews, local officials, and hundreds of supporters. They unveiled a mural painted on that brick wall, a beautiful rendering of Emma and Justice, with the words, "One act of courage can change the world." Justice, now healthy and strong, his scars faded but visible, sat beneath his own image. His tail wagged as children approached to pet him, their parents telling them the story of the little girl and the dying dog who'd sparked a revolution. "You know what the best part is?" Emma said to Wrench as they watched Justice interact with admirers. "He's not scared anymore. He trusts people again. Even after everything they did to him, he chose to love again." Wrench wiped his eyes, something he did frequently around Emma now. "That's because he had you. You showed him that some people are worth trusting." Emma looked up at this gruff Marine who'd become like a grandfather to her. "You all showed us the same thing. When we had nothing, when we thought we'd lose everything, you showed us that we weren't alone." That evening, the Desert Riders organized a memorial ride, not for someone who'd died, but for someone who'd lived. They rode through Phoenix, 300 motorcycles strong, with Emma in Wrench's sidecar and Justice in his custom sidecar beside her. People lined the streets cheering. Children held signs. Dogs barked from yards. And somewhere in that crowd, the woman who'd named her rescue dog Emma stood with tears streaming down her face, holding Hope's leash, both of them proof that courage was contagious. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Emma looked at Justice riding beside her, his ears flapping in the wind, his tongue hanging out in a doggy smile. She thought about that terrible day in the alley, about the choice she'd made, about how one moment of compassion had cascaded into something she never could have imagined. Sarah, riding behind Wrench, watched her daughter and Justice with overwhelming pride. They'd lost everything and gained a family. They'd faced impossible odds and discovered that love, real, fierce, uncompromising love, could move mountains. 10 years later, Emma would graduate from Arizona State University with a degree in veterinary medicine, top of her class. Justice would be there, older and grayer but still strong, still proud. The scholarship fund bearing her name would have helped 23 students achieve their dreams of working with animals. But that night, riding through Phoenix with her rescued dog and her chosen family, Emma was just a 9-year-old girl who'd learned the most important lesson of all, that even the smallest person, armed with nothing but courage and compassion, could change the world. And she had. One dying dog, one fearless girl, 300 bikers who refused to let courage go unrewarded. Justice had been served, and love had won. The end.